Okay. Okay. We are finally about ready to start here, so you are being recorded.
Ooh, I don't even have to change cameras at all, do I?
You will, because when they talk stuff, we have to go to wide angle. Okay. We actually have a decent turnout. I was worried that we'd only have like 6 people. So those 6 people just were really, really early. So thank you for all for coming. And especially coming out on a amazingly nice night after however many days of 90 degree temperatures. To talk about conflicts of interest, ethics, and principles. Great fun stuff. Hopefully we have fun in the latter half of the meeting when we talk about some scenarios. First half's going to be kind of dry and probably intuitive. That's why ethics is so easy but so hard, because you all know it, but yet you don't when it sometimes comes down to the nitty-gritty. I don't mean that negatively, it's just there's lots of options, and we'll get into that. So, okay, Brent. Is it that slow, or there we go. So, introductions, conflicts of interest, ethics, principles, gray areas, scenarios, and discussion, and then a discussion of upcoming training session topics. About the first half of the meeting, so about half an hour, it's going to be me talking about some of the code, state code requirements, and then some of the ethics that we have from the American Planning Association, and then the second half will be those scenarios and discussion. So, real quick, next slide. How about some introductions? We all are kind of getting to know each other, but it's still nice to remind everybody, because we only see each other every few months, who you are, which commission and boards you are part of, and the fun question tonight: if you had to give an impromptu hour-long talk about any topic, what topic would you talk about? So, for what it's worth, I'm Nathan. You know me. I'm the planning director for all y'all's communities, and my hour-long impromptu talk on any topic would be the interurban railroads of Indiana. And trust me, I could go on for way more than an hour. So, Brent?
I'm Brent Bockelman. I am staff to the County Plan Commission, County BZA, and RDC. Also a recently appointed city councilman. If I had to give an hour-long impromptu discussion about something, it'd probably be deer hunting.
Easy enough. John?
John Kissinger on the planning and BZA, city BZA board. And if I was going to talk for an hour, I'd probably talk about our workforce in the construction field.
Larry Weiss, serve on the Columbia City Planning Commission. If I was to speak for an hour, and I don't want to put you all asleep, I'd give you some guidelines and outlines of outside plant design for telephone facilities, and have you guys out in 20 minutes.
Don, how about you?
Yeah, Don Langlow, I'm on the board through the city. I drive around the city quite a bit with projects. And I'd say the last 2 months, we are supposed to have lawns mowed at a certain height. We've got a skating rink out there with no signs of the age or whatever. We've got about 6 or 7 people with broken, usually it's arms or hands or something. And I don't know who takes care of that anymore. People, I thought usually the police department or they sold us way back 10 years ago that if they saw a red light was burned out, they let them know down there, but I don't know now, they don't even see the red light, so, and by that time they throw me out, and I do know.
Okay. Pat?
Pat Zickraft, city plan. If I was gonna talk for an hour, it would be about my 3.5-year-old grandson.
Oh.
I didn't even fool.
Chad?
I'm Chad Banks. I'm on the Whitley County Planning Commission. And if I were to talk, if I were to give that hour-long impromptu talk, I think I'll go with fly fishing in the West for trout.
Okay.
Travis Baker, the county planning, impromptu talk would probably be biologicals and agriculture.
Jack Green, with the County BZA and Planning Commission. And an hour-long talk, I would probably talk about the dangers of alcohol.
Dan Whittle, Columbia City Council, President of Council, Columbia City Board of Works, Columbia City Planning Commission, and for another month and 3-4 days, GIS coordinator for Whitley County. If I could give a talk, it'd probably be on coaching, on how parents should interact with the coach and how players should interact with the coach. I coached for 36 years.
Pat Stanford, Churubusco Plan Commission. Depending upon the audience, factory automation, cooking, or my kids.
Good choices.
Brent Emmerich, President, Whitley County Planning Commission, and I would likely talk about my 2 kids, soon to be 3. So.
Okay.
Viv Sage, Churubusco Plan Commission. I'd probably talk about my crazy family. Kelly Sheese, Whitley County Board of Zoning Appeals. It's a no-brainer, the importance of agriculture in rural, urban, and metropolitan communities.
Okay.
Dennis Mornick, Columbia City Planning Commission, Columbia City BZA. If I had to talk for an hour, it'd probably be about Notre Dame football.
Yeah. Nikki Venable, City Plan Commission, an hour, behavior modification.
I'm right, Whitley County BZA. I just probably talk about fishing trips.
Okay.
Danny Wilkinson, Whitley County BZA. I probably talk about antique toys or antique advertising signs.
Cool. I love how everybody's answer, other than a couple fishing, everybody's answer is really, really widely varied. So that's impressive. Okay, moving on.
Which screen do I go to now? I didn't see what it was on before. I know that one, but the display.
Back to the camera 4 and screen.
Got it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so that's the agenda again tonight. So next slide. So barreling into this, conflicts of interest. We'll start with the definition. Merriam-Webster defines conflict of interest as a conflict between the private interests and the official responsibilities of a person in a position of trust. So that leads to 3 questions just from that definition. What exactly are private interests? What are official responsibilities? And who are persons in positions of trust? State law gives us some guidance. We'll cover that first, and then ethics helps to fill in gaps, and then your own personal choices helps finish the question list. Helps to answer all those questions. So first, state code. Indiana code defines conflicts of interest in several ways. The first one is in 3544.1-4, which applies to all public officials. Then we also have 3674.223 and 909, which apply to plan commissions and BZA specifically. those are the ones that we'll focus on in more depth because that's what you guys all are. However, since you are also public officials, we'll cover the first one as well. There are other conflicts of interest, I believe, sections throughout the state code, but they don't necessarily apply here, or at least I'm not going to talk about them. So, the conflict of interest for public officials generally. The excerpt from the state statute, a public servant who knowingly or intentionally has a peculiar, I can't even say that word. No, it's not peculiar, there's an N in there. It basically means financial, but it's more than just financial. Interest in or derives profit from a contract or purchase connected with an action by a governmental entity served by the public servant commits a conflict of interest, which is a level 6 felony. BZAs don't have any ability to contract with anybody except for maybe legal counsel. Plan commissions, R4 plan commissions, don't contract with anyone, although that is an authority that some plan commissions are granted some places. So what does this mean? It means that the component there that is a contract or purchase connected with the governmental entity served by the public servant. So you could have a scenario where you as a member have a contract with a jurisdiction. And if so, that could run afoul of this conflict of interest statute. There is an escape saying if you file a disclosure notice with the county clerk, and Commissioner Banks can give you the process behind that, because you've done that a couple times so far this year with your business, then you're covered. But keep that in mind if you have a business or basically a business, or if you work for a business that does work with the county or with your other jurisdiction, city, towns, you may need to be filing a conflict of interest in order to cover yourself there. Example, from my time in Greenfield, we had a city plan commission member who owned an office supply store from which it wasn't just the police department, it was actually the whole city, but bought office supplies, paper clips, and so on. So when this state statute came into play that he had to file a disclosure, he had to file a disclosure of that conflict of interest. So something to keep in mind, even though you're not going to be creating a contract with Plan Commission that you serve on, it may still be with the overall jurisdiction. So moving on, more specifically to 223, the Plan Commissions. And I copied out all of the sections here, and we'll go through these separately in chunks. Section A, subsection A. This section does not apply, so conflict of interest, the term conflict of interest does not apply to the preparation or adoption of a comprehensive plan under the 500 series of this chapter. So you Plan Commission members, as well as the elected officials who regard the adoption of a comprehensive plan, conflict of interest does not apply during that process. You can have financial interest in a comprehensive plan, and because you're residents of your jurisdiction, you probably will have a financial interest because you're trying to promote the growth of your community through your comprehensive plan, and that growth will help your business. It will help you financially. So that is explicitly excluded out because I don't know the exact history of it, but I can imagine people were trying to claim that, oh, you can't approve this comp plan because it benefits you. Well, it benefits the whole community, including me. Subsection B, a member of a plan commission or a legislative body, so that's commissioners or councils, is disqualified and may not participate as a member of the plan commission or the legislative body in a hearing or a recommendation concerning a legislative act as described in 1016 of the chapter in which the member has a direct or indirect financial interest. The commission shall enter into the records that this was a disqualification. So what are legislative acts under 1016? Next. 1016, section 1016 deals with what can be challenged, and so to the courts. And so in this, there are some lists, but overall the section doesn't really apply, but this list does. Legislative acts that are subject to the financial interest, conflict of interest, would be are excluded, include adopting a comprehensive plan, which again, it's listed twice, so it must be really important that comp plans are excluded. Certifying a recommendation for a zoning map change, adopting, rejecting, or amending a zoning ordinance, adopting, rejecting, or amending an impact fee, changing a zoning district where a development plan is required, amending a PUD district, amending a floodplain zoning ordinance, and recommending, modifying, or terminating commitments. Planned unit development. So planned unit developments under the current state statute are a specialized form of a zoning district, basically created on a case-by-case basis. That's as opposed to planned unit development under the old state statute prior to 1993, which was essentially treated similar to a special exception, which was a BZA action. It's now a plan commission action as a zoning district. Can go into a lot more detail, but that's what it is. We only have one current PUD in the county. So under those legislative acts, if you have a direct or indirect financial interest, except for the adoption of comprehensive plans, which were exempt from the previous section, excuse me, I misspoke before, then you would have to recuse yourself. But you can still be biased, you can still know the people involved if you don't have a financial interest. Going on to the next slide, subsection C, a member of the Plan Commission is disqualified and may not participate in a hearing that concerns a zoning decision, as described in section 1016, if the member is biased, prejudiced, or otherwise unable to be impartial, as well as having a direct or indirect financial interest. So those zoning decisions that apply to plan commissions, next slide, include final decisions about subdivisions, final decisions about appeals of commitment modifications and terminations, and there's some interplay between what falls under which section, whether financial interest or simply, or bias also applies on that one. I just wrote just simply that. Final decisions on development plans and final decisions on PUDs in certain instances. The ones that we deal with most frequently, of course, are subdivisions. So if you, plan commission members, feel like you cannot be impartial during a subdivision hearing, for whatever reason, and we'll go through some more discussion about what those reasons might be, then you should recuse yourself and not participate in that subdivision hearing. Of course, if you have a direct or indirect financial interest, you're co-owner of the developer, for example, you also should recuse yourself. Going on then to what happens, the subsection D, the Plan Commission shall enter into the Plan Commission's records the fact that we had a disqualification and the name of an alternate member, if so, if there was one appointed, and if that appointed alternate member actually participates in their place. And all of that staff takes care of. Going on. Subsection E. This is one that we don't really think of necessarily, but it makes sense. A member of a plan commission or a legislative body may not directly or personally represent another person in a hearing before that commission or body concerning a zoning decision or a legislative act. For example, and I use this because I know this happened, and I don't know whether it happened before or after this code came into play, but a plan commission member who happens to be a surveyor presents a client's proposed subdivision plan. Basically, they say, hold on, plan commission, I need to go to the podium because I have this, I'm the surveyor of record for this plat. That is, under the current state statute, a definite no. That is a definite conflict of interest, cannot happen. However, you can represent yourself. So if you're the petitioner, you recuse yourself as a member, and of course you can represent yourself. Importantly, though, you can't represent your neighbor or anybody else in that same board that you sit on, even if you do recuse yourself. And finally, those members, actually everybody who gets paid, if that recusal results in you not participating in the entire meeting, you don't get paid for the meeting, nor do you get mileage. I don't think anybody gets mileage. So just wanted to round that out. Going on to the boards of zoning appeals, this is a lot easier. Subsection A, very similar wording. You cannot participate in a hearing or decision concerning a zoning matter if the member is biased, prejudiced, or otherwise unable to be impartial, or has that direct or indirect financial interest in the outcome of the hearing or the decision. It's a little bit different wording there in the outcome of, but still effectively the same. Next slide. And then, of course, the board shall enter into the records the fact that there had been a disqualification and who, if anyone, serves in their place. So going on then, kind of backtracking a little bit to give you some examples of financial interest, because this isn't always clear. Direct financial interest, you probably have a good sense of that. Being a party to a petition, for example, you have a direct financial interest. If you own property that's involved in the petition, that's a direct financial interest. If you're employed by the petitioner, depending on what that employment status is, if the petitioner is McDonald's and you're a line cook, probably not. If you are a co-owner, you probably should recuse yourself. And then substantial, another example would be a substantial investment in the petitioner company. So if you own stock, if you're a major stockholder, that too would be a direct financial interest. Indirect financial interest is way harder to describe, and the only consistent guidance is typically if you have a family member, and definitely if it is your spouse, who has that direct financial interest, that is definitely an indirect financial interest for you. If it's a third cousin, probably not. If it's a second cousin, maybe. First cousin, maybe. Brother, a lot of variables there. That's why I say spouse is the only one that's very clearly defined as carrying over. Other indirect financial interests, maybe being an adjacent property owner might be an indirect financial interest. Maybe what's being proposed would impact you financially. Maybe it wouldn't. And then arguably another one that I could find would be having a competing business. So business is proposing a rezoning, for example, and you own the competing business. If approving their rezoning means they give them an edge over your business, that might be an indirect financial interest. Don't know for sure. Every case is a little different. So just be aware as these things come up. So bias, prejudice, and partiality. These are, again, kind of intuitive, kind of know it by gut, but sometimes not so much. So sometimes it's kind of obvious, reason stated for being biased, knowing the petitioner as a neighbor, friend, third grade classmate, whatever the case may be. Oh yeah, I remember you. Yeah, I feel like that might give me a bit of an edge in liking you better. And I may not be able to really consider the facts of the case because of that. Belonging to the same fraternal organization or church as the petitioner might also be cause for being biased. Even if you don't really know them, just the fact that you're associated in the same organization might be. On the flip side, those two things were kind of positive. If you just don't like the petitioner, you just think, you just groan when you saw the name, In certain instances, that's enough to say, no, you really should just recuse yourself. If that clouds your judgment enough, step aside. So,
To some of our areas, that's kind of hard not to potentially know who the person is.
to know them, that's a great point. Just simply knowing somebody may or may not be enough, but it's that added aspect. Does knowing them make you apt to say, I'm more likely to approve this because of who you are, not what you're proposing and the facts of what's going on? Sometimes knowing the person means that, okay, yeah, I can trust that person a little bit more because they have a track record that I happen to know, but sometimes that's deceiving too, and especially if you're the only one who knows that track record. So it's really case by case. Really comes down to whether you feel like you can be impartial. Again, mostly self-determined, but you're also watching out for cases where someone may say, well, you think you were being unbiased. I don't think so because of this long string of how you know this person. So, kind of wish we had one of our legal counsels here to kind of give some more background to that, but that's fine. Going on. Related to this, ex parte communication is kind of its own topic. It's kind of related to ethics, kind of related to procedures. We've talked about it at various trainings before, but I bring it up here because ex parte, one of the reasons that we avoid ex parte communication, which ex parte means talking to or meeting with someone outside of the official meeting process, is because that ex parte communication or contact may create bias, may create prejudice, may be a positive thing, maybe make you feel more comfortable with what they're proposing, but it biases you towards or against what that person is proposing in a way that the rest of the members don't necessarily have. Importantly, under the state statute, only the BZA is prohibited from having ex parte communication. Under 920G, a person may not communicate with any member of the BZA before the hearing with the intent to influence the member's action on the matter pending before the court. There's an exception for staff reports, and rules of procedure can kind of give some more refinement to that, but the BZA is prohibited from having that communication. Plan Commission and elected officials, the legislative body, don't have that statutory prohibition, which can be good, especially with your elected officials who get constituent letters, for example, about a case. But still, there should be some check to that. It shouldn't be, oh yeah, I'll come meet with you before this case and really discuss what's going on, so then I have more knowledge than all of my other members. That's the problem. You may be better, you may be more knowledgeable and therefore biased, again, other than as compared to other members. Yeah, Kelly.
This has never happened, but if someone would come up to you and say, it'd be after a decision is made at a BZA meeting, and they'd say, why did you turn that down? Or, you know, why did you approve it? Maybe they're a disgruntled neighbor. Are you at liberty then to explain your process? Because if we as members don't take the time to explain our reasoning in a meeting, and we don't always do, we just vote, then that person's kind of left with an unknown. Is it their role to come to you and you to ask us and you to parlay that back, or you see them in the aisle at Kroger and they're like, hey, why'd you vote against that? Never happened, but.
No, it's a great question, and again, these are things that hopefully we never have happen here, but great questions to ask. So let me start with, if it's past 30 days, past the decision, so past the appeal period, you can generally tell them whatever you feel like because it can't be appealed. Within the period, so immediately after the meeting, really kind of watch yourself because they might use that for, well, no, I disagree with those reasons, doesn't line up with the findings that you approved or staff wrote or whatever. So now I'm going to appeal it because you're being very arbitrary and capricious. You could rely on staff, yes, and we could have some back and forth. That's a way to buffer yourself. If it's something that you're trying to be helpful with, which kind of sounds like you're kind of saying, well, we denied it because of this, but if you did this, we might approve it. That kind of is its own course. So that might be best saying, hey, that's something you should talk with staff about, or here's an idea to talk with staff about, maybe to refile later. So there's several different things, and it really depends on each case, the scenario, and how comfortable you feel disclosing what you have would be. Best thing would just be, like, I just can't really talk about it right now, if you don't feel comfortable.
Okay, thank you. I just know several years ago, before I was on the BZA, there was parking lot starters, and so they'd be out there as soon as the meeting got done and want to talk to, whether it was planning commission, BZA members, and.
Yeah, you're popular. One other thing, again, for Plan Commission and legislative bodies, in some of the rules of procedure, we talk about if you do meet with a person prior to a case, prior to a hearing, and you do glean information, it's context of, say, a site visit, but it could be viewed as ex parte contact as well. The rules of procedure of several of the jurisdictions give you outlines of how to then disclose that to the rest of the members. So what you learn can be shared with everybody else, whether it be before the meeting or during the meeting. So again, ex parte communication sometimes can be helpful, but really has to be checked. Going on then, things to consider. Number one, objectivity. Are you being objective? Or if you're not, why? So one example would be, would you be against the request even if it met all the code requirements? So your mentality, your ideology, what you think of the person just completely overrides the fact of the case, and if it met all the requirements, you would still deny it. Really check yourself to see if you are being biased or prejudiced or partial. Sometimes you could still say, no, it meets all the code requirements, but I'm against it because in this particular location. And that's a little different than saying anywhere. So that's one example. Also, are your feelings based upon the proposal itself or based upon a prior opinion of the applicant? Again, you didn't like the guy, you saw his name and you thought, oh, geez. So check yourself if you can be objective on that. Knowledge. As I've mentioned, you have information that none of the other members have. Have you gathered that information on your own? Is that stuff that you can share with staff to share with everybody? Is that stuff you can share with the rest of the members? Whatever. And how did you obtain that knowledge? And then finally, ethics is another thing to consider, which leads into the next section. There are two components of ethics for the planning world. Of course, you have your own religions and ethical considerations for you personally. We're not going into those because that's everybody has their own set of ethics that you have lived with your entire life. But specific to planning and zoning requirements, we have two. One is the AICP Code of Ethics, the American Institute of Certified Planners Code of Ethics and Professional Conduct. There are basically three different parts to that Code of Ethics. 35 aspirational principles, which say, we should do this and we should do that. And I listed three there. Pay special attention to the interrelatedness of decisions and their unintended consequences. So we as professional planners, certified planners, really look at that, not just the proposed, but also the bigger picture. Promote excellence in design. Well, hey, if you did this, you'd wind up with better product. Deal fairly with all participants in the process, so not treating anybody differently. And then there's 32 more beyond that. Rules of practice and behavior, these are enforceable. there are 24 rules that we as certified planners have to follow, and I listed 3 there, and the final part is enforcement. So I list those there, not so much for any real benefit to you guys other than to know that is a thing, and that is my code of ethics that I follow as a certified planner. By and large, they're very not easy to follow, but they make sense. You don't have a lot of ethical dilemmas typically. Sometimes it's more the dilemmas are in some of the how do I treat other planners, giving other planners advice, for example, is an important part of it. Improvement of the profession. So sometimes it's those farther flung ones that cause more trouble. And then enforcement, as I said, just how do you enforce those rules? But ethics, in terms of ethical principles in planning, this is the American Planning Association's set of 20 different principles, and this is what everybody got handed out. And my apologies for the size of the font. That's I increased it to 110%, and it's still not very big. But they kind of overlap, and those are guiding principles for citizen planners, for non-professional planners, which you all are, as well as for planning staff, as well as on the backside, APA members, so who aren't certified. I'm not going to talk about that, but the 20 principles for the first 2 sections that apply to citizens, those are ones, I think the city code actually includes a mention that the city members need to follow these explicitly. It's a good recommendation for everybody else. So the first one is the planning process must continuously pursue and faithfully serve the public interest. You're here to serve the public interest. And a couple of the principles I pulled out there: strive to expand choice and opportunity for all persons, recognizing the special responsibility to plan for the needs of disadvantaged groups and persons, and pay special attention to the interrelatedness of decisions and the long-range consequences of present actions. That sounds kind of similar to what I just said. Look at the big picture. The second part, planning process participants continually strive to achieve high standards of integrity and proficiency so that the public respect for the planning process will be maintained. That's important. Maintaining that integrity as professionals is one thing, but as non-professional planners, the public looks to you to uphold a governmental process. And those principles really help to reinforce that. Again, a couple that I pulled out here: exercise fair, honest, and independent judgment in their roles as decision makers and advisors, and not participate as an advisor or decision maker on a plan or project in which they have previously participated as an advocate. So let's say you're an advocate for having chickens in city limits, and you get appointed to the Plan Commission, and you want to start pushing for that to be an issue in the zoning code. Well, should you recuse yourself on that ethic or not? That's something to consider. Or vice versa. When you weren't appointed, you were pro-chicken, and now you're appointed as a member and you're anti-chicken. That flip-flop is also an ethic to consider. Is that appropriate? Or should you back off? So going on, principles and gray areas. And this is just kind of highlighting the fact that principles and ethics, despite all of these great ideas, you will have some choices. If you really think through things, you will have choices and balancing to make. For example, principles and positions can conflict. So you will have potentially a situation of balancing disclosure of information to the public versus keeping that information confidential. You may have a business that comes in and says, well, here's what you requested, but you can't disclose it to the public because it's proprietary. But if it's part of the decision-making process, that's supposed to be public. So that's going to be one of those balancing acts. We had that somewhat during the solar panel cases. There were a few things that were being talked about at the proprietary level, didn't matter to the public, they were very clear what was or wasn't, but it was further information for the Plan Commission, for example. Community interest versus personal property rights, that's one that's always constant, but really what are the ethics of balancing out what's important to the community versus individual property owners. As planners, oftentimes the community, the codes are tilted towards the community, but you can't lose sight of property values and personal property rights. Professional training versus public opinion. Let's say you are you have some background, you own a business, a bakery, for example, and you know how to make a cake, and there's some zoning case coming up about that will regulate bakeries in town, and the public is generally against it, but you as a seasoned baker say, oh no, this bakery really is modern technology, really will have a great thing, really won't have the impacts that the public thinks it does. What are the ethics and how do you balance what you already know because you know it professionally versus the public opinion, which may be informed, it may be misinformed, and how do you do that responsibly? So those are some examples there of those conflicts. And then ethical judgment calls, conscientious balance, depends on the specific situation. You may make a call that's different depending on which situation. Mentioned that a couple times. And then consider all of the ethics, 20 principles, 50-some principles if you're a certified planner, the laws, because that could get you into jail, your rules of procedure, your own ethics outside of everything else. Take that as a bundle and really start to weigh everything out. And then make a judgment call. There's no right answer. Okay, there are some right answers. There are some wrong answers. We'll get to that here in a second. But by and large, make a judgment call on your ethics that you feel comfortable with. If your gut doesn't feel right, it's probably not right. Talk it over with people. Talk it over with staff. Talk it over with legal counsel. Talk it over with a therapist. Whatever. Don't be afraid, though. Worst thing is to really just do it the way we've always done it, because that's the way we've always done it, and not think. So that's me lecturing now for about half an hour because we started late. Questions, thoughts on this stuff? Kelly? Oh no, it's fine. I asked for questions.
But it's not in there, and I just personally, I need to know this because I don't know. And
Yes.
I'm going to be blunt and give the example without trying to make it a scenario or a gray area. Somebody comes to the planning commission and asks for a rezone. Say they go from ag to rural residential, general commercial, village commercial, whatever.
Whatever, yeah.
Planning commission is considering it, and in that process, they get a letter of support from the county commissioner. But yet, whether the planning commission approves it or not, it will go before the commissioners to approve.
Mm-hmm.
Is that not a conflict of interest for the commissioner to write a letter of support for something that they are ultimately going to have the final approval on?
So, from a state code standpoint, I would say no, because assuming that the commissioner doesn't have a stake in that business that's rezoning, they just like that idea. Say it's let's say it's a machine shop that's going in. They just think that, hey, we need to have more welders who are employed, and this machine shop will employ those welders. Therefore, I support it. They don't have anything to gain from it. They don't have anything to lose from it. So statutorily, I would say no. It wouldn't be a conflict of interest. Ethically, there might be some ethical questions to that. And so they would have to make those determinations. But no, I would say legally, probably not. Even though they then would hear that later. It's all part of one process. So I wouldn't be too concerned about where in the process it comes. But yeah, if they had a stake in that business, or if they were an adjacent property owner, or all those other things, then yeah, I would say it very well could venture into a legal conflict of interest. And
I wasn't worried so much as the legal as the ethical.
Yeah.
Because I think that is just as important as the legal aspect.
Yeah. A couple of ethical considerations would be: would that letter be helping or usurping the public input process? Depending on what's said, it might be both. Could be either. Might be both, but could be either. Well, it could go either way. Yeah, that's a really good example of the ethics at play. Other questions, thoughts? Viv?
I have some thoughts. Having served on the town council in Churubusco in the late 90s, early 2000s, and now I'm in the Churubusco Plan Commission, and being from a large family, there is no way in hell there's not a conflict of interest all the time. With all of them, not just with me. Everybody knows everybody. Everybody's got relatives who are coming before the board. Everybody, I served on the town council with 2 businessmen in Churubusco who had a lot of things that came before the board. I mean, I just don't see how you can even get around that. There are 3 members of a council, and I sit out and 2 vote. And
yeah.
I sit out on a couple because I have conflict of interest.
Yeah.
But you don't see that happen that often in a small town.
Definitely right. And it's one of those things, if it's large enough of a conflict that you feel strongly about it, you sit out. If you just say, oh, that's just my cousin, I haven't seen them for 6 months, I don't know what they're doing, then probably not a big deal. But you're right. Churubusco is even one of the larger small towns. We have even smaller that have zoning. So it is an issue. It really is an issue. And anytime you have members of 3 boards, so town council or commissioners, for example, if 2 of them have a conflict of interest, well, what's going to happen?
Right.
So
I just don't, I mean, there's just some cases where it just happens.
Yeah.
And some people are not going to sit out.
Yeah, that's, and sometimes those are just hard decisions that have to be made. Okay. Any other questions about the meat of this stuff? Okay. Not seeing any. So what we'll go, I have 12 different scenarios. I figured maybe a couple minutes apiece for discussion, and then what would you do? And discussion or talk over. So this will go till about 10 after, and we'll kind of cut it off even if we don't get through all of them. The first couple are kind of all strung together. So scenario 1.1, Tom serves on the Euclid BZA, town BZA, I assume. On the agenda is a variance request for Tom's next door neighbor, Irma. They've lived next to each other for 14 years. She is now proposing to rebuild her house after a fire and needs a setback variance since the footprint would be changing. Under Indiana law, if you keep the same footprint, you don't need a variance. Thus, her footprint is changing. But she is proposing to keep the same 12-foot setbacks that they were previously. Because she's changing it, she needs a variance, but she's changing the footprint, needs variance. The setback is still being kept the same. Tom, the member, participates in the hearing and votes in favor of the variance. Is this action that he takes ethical? Is it legal under Indiana law? And what, if anything, should be done differently? So I will give everybody about a minute or so to discuss among yourselves. This is why we have groups. And then we'll kind of come back.
You could be like, wouldn't be a good neighbor.
So, yeah. Confusing stuff, yes.
Okay, so it doesn't affect him whatsoever.
Because he's damned if he does.
Yeah.
Basically, she's working on the inside parameters of what the policy is about. But it says it's changed.
What if they wanna go just 6 inches because of something?
There again, it's up to him.
Well, they want
He's okay with it.
I'm just gonna stay inside the 12-foot setback.
Okay, I think that's about a minute, so, back table? What do you think? Is this ethical for him to participate in the hearing and vote in favor?
That was like speed dating.
How about middle table? What do you guys think?
We think he's fine.
Yeah, he's fine.
So it was ethical for him to participate? Okay. And of course, no conflict of interest, and doesn't have financial interest, didn't feel like it was biased or anything. Okay. What about you two?
Same.
Probably okay. You guys?
No, we feel he should remove himself.
And why?
Because we felt that he was gonna get stuck either way if he left it in the same position it was at, and everybody goes, wow, you did that for her because she's your neighbor. Or they says no, and she's gotta set it back, and then, then it's gonna be like water and oil living beside each other.
Okay, sounds good. You guys were kind of talking over the same thing, I'm guessing.
Well, I had to do it here, about a year ago? I had to, well, I don't know how, if you guys guided me that I had to recuse myself when we had a property owner want to put a building with a variance.
It was suggested, for sure. So, yeah, in this case, I would say you might look at that being 14 years, that he really knows this neighbor really well, and so that might cloud his judgment, but it doesn't really affect him, too. So you could say, well, he has no interest in it, and it doesn't matter. So it probably could go either way, but I'm also hearing to be on the safe side, recuse yourself. Scenario 1.2 then. Moving on. So Tom and Irma again. Instead of rebuilding the house as was prior to the fire, Irma changes the design to construct a larger and taller house that would, instead of having a 12-foot setback, have a 2.5-foot setback along Tom's property line. The new house would block Tom's view of the sunset, but Tom says that there really wouldn't be any impact on the use of his property despite it being 2.5 feet away. Tom participates in the hearing and votes against this variance. Is it ethical, legal? What else could be done? So I'll give you another minute or so.
Speak against it.
I remember when I came through. I got to hear all that.
It affects his property, right?
I've heard of people saying that.
Yeah.
They did.
Too close together, I called Don. Unless he's truly needed to swing the vote, split down the middle, then just declare conflict, but.
Redraw that.
Okay, so it's been about a minute. We'll start up front this time. Should have recused himself, so it was definitely unethical and probably a conflict of interest as well. Any suggestions? What else could have been done differently besides recusing yourself?
He could have spoke against it after he recused himself. If it was obviously to stay on the board, the DA to persuade the board to vote a certain way. That's the problem.
Okay. Did anybody else feel differently, that it wasn't a problem with ethics? Everybody thought he should have recused himself? Yeah. Okay. And in this case, again, if he really felt like it was no issue and that he didn't have a financial interest, well, kind of goes to why did he vote against the variance? Maybe there was some factor of the case that isn't in this clue or this question that he was voting against. Or maybe he just felt like upholding the code because that's the code.
In your best interest, make it a night to take your wife out to dinner.
He was neighboring property.
Exactly.
Scenario 1.3. So Tom and Irma still. Irma obtains the 2.5 foot variance setback. That happened 5 months ago. Instead of building the house that she had proposed, she sells the property to a new owner, Carlos. Carlos proposes to construct a different house that would have a 5 foot setback instead of that 2.5 foot setback. Because of the wording of the code, and some other codes require this, that 5 foot setback would still require a variance, even though previous case had 2.5 foot. Tom participates in the hearing again and votes against this variance. Ethics, conflict of interest, what could be done differently?
Yeah. Well, if they voted for 2.5, because he had 2.5.
If he would have met the same 2.5, with the variance would still hold, right?
Yeah, not necessarily. A lot of times when we do variances for that.
What's legal setback? What's the legal setback? They didn't tell you that.
We
never already had
it. Is it 10?
We never had
Still setbacks on it's the neighboring property, yeah. Accuse himself and then just speak against it. As far as this.
Yeah. You should still take his wife out to dinner and sit that meeting.
Okay, that's about a minute. I'm hearing another suggestion of taking the wife out to dinner. What do you guys think on this one? Should he recuse himself?
Yes.
Why?
Once again, just, he's too close to me, he's a neighbor.
I didn't think that he should have recused himself because it's a new neighbor.
It's a new neighbor he doesn't know so well. That is definitely true.
We never did say if the setback is on his property line or not, but still it's a neighbor.
Yeah, it's.
Setback's still closer to his home than what the original one was at 12 feet.
This is true.
He was gonna allow it.
We'll have that house go so much closer to him than what the other one was. So he could have a pretty strong opinion on that.
Yeah. So still could be carryover from that. He could still have a legal conflict of interest because you could argue that there was still a financial impact on him, even though potentially you said it wasn't. In this particular case, it's also, depending on how he voted the last time, if he had voted no and the other members voted yes and it was approved, ethically he may be okay on this one because he's very consistent. No, I was against that one, I'm against this one. But if he flip-flopped, that definitely would be an ethical issue. Even if the conflict of interest was okay, there could be an ethical issue there. Scenario 2.1. Chuck is a citizen member on the Euclid Plan Commission. He owns an excavation company that contracts with various developers around the city. A developer that Chuck's company works with regularly, but does not currently have a contract with, proposes a 51-lot subdivision. The subdivision size is likely too large for Chuck's company to undertake. Chuck participates in the hearing and votes to approve the subdivision. What do you guys think?
The fact that he's showing no interest in the activities.
Because.
What's that?
I'm the same that does not participate in development.
Scratch your back, where's the
This
back?
team is more, right?
Yeah, I think it's an ethical thing.
Yeah.
That's what we're working on.
I mean, especially if you have even if you approve it, and the general contractor puts it out for them to do the dirt work, I mean, he's not tight.
So, who thinks that this, that participating and voting to approve the subdivision is ethical? Got two groups, and of course the others would be unethical. What about legal as a conflict of interest? Is it legal? Would you get in trouble? But you're saying that it's
Potential conflict.
potential conflict. So it's not necessarily a financial interest, but what about indirect financial interest?
Well, if
Because you can get the next job.
an individual, let's say a person that bought a lot and he needs to have it dirt brought in and re-leveled for the construction of a particular home, then that's just a roll of the dice situation that he got came. It's not the developer.
Yeah. Okay. So could go either way on this one. I would say, yeah, depends on how you view it and how committed it is, how committed he is to avoiding interaction with that developer. So scenario 2.2 then, different developer proposes a 45 lot subdivision. Chuck's company used to do work for this developer until they started to require daily safety meetings for all contractors, which Chuck felt was just a waste of time. So he hasn't done work for him since. The planning director recommends approval of the subdivision because it meets the code standards. Chuck participates in the hearing and votes to deny the subdivision request. Ethical, conflict of interest, and so on.
I think he doesn't like his.
He's
written like
He's got an accent, right?
He's acting out.
So
There's too much, there's not enough information in this.
I need to ask some questions of Chuck.
So we have one table who wants to interrogate Chuck. What about the other three? Ethical, conflict of interest, what do you think?
He should have recused himself.
Should have recused himself, definitely unethical, definitely conflict of interest.
Grudge at you.
He's a pretty biased.
Going on then, 2.3. A developer that Chuck is contracted with, does have a contract with, is proposing a 5-lot subdivision. An hour before the meeting, the developer contacts Chuck and lets him know that they won't be able to attend the meeting because of a last-minute illness. Therefore, by the rules, it would be continued automatically. Chuck says that since he was planning to recuse himself anyway, he can present the case for them, which he does. The Plan Commission then votes in favor of the subdivision. Is this ethical, conflict of interest? Okay, so I'm hearing a resounding no, shouldn't have happened.
I get frustrated when the actual petitioner doesn't come, like they send you a planner. I mean, I just wanna see the actual person on that. That's just a sign. It doesn't affect the way I vote.
Okay. How many more of these do you guys want to do? It's 10 after. We have 3 more pages of these.
Do one more thing.
Do one more page, I heard? Okay. How about all the scenario 3? So there's 3 sub-scenarios here. Scenario 3.1. Samira is on the Nolan County BZA. Mary proposes to construct a large chicken coop in a residential area, which under their zoning ordinance requires a special exception approval. Leading up to the meeting, Samira has been very vocal about her opposition to the coop to staff, to the point of accusing staff of being paid off to allow the special exception even to be filed. However, during the hearing, Samira participates, but doesn't really say anything. In other words, she's listening, nodding her head and stuff, but just doesn't really say anything. She ends up voting in favor of the request. After the meeting, staff overhears Mary thanking Samira for her vote. What do you think about the ethics, conflict of interest? What else could be done?
Dan, what do you think of that?
Anything involved.
I think Mary had something on somewhere.
I like it. You say no chicken to the resident, and that's just.
Especially very much creates.
So I'm hearing some allusions to we don't really know what's going on, but it could be maybe either way, and ethically, if there's an appearance of a conflict of interest, maybe it should have been recused, but a true conflict of interest definitely needs more information. A legal conflict.
I would think the fact that she was openly objecting prior to the presentation of the meeting, that she made open intentions known, and she, right from that point, should have been included.
Okay, so even though, if she had a pre-existing aversion to it, she should have just recused herself because of that. That's a good thought.
Now my question to you in that situation, the fact that, let's say that happens, and the planning director openly hears that, and then she comes to the meeting and does not, can the director openly say, you have voiced or shown bias in this presentation, and you know, need to be stepped down or removed or something like that?
That is an ethical question I can't answer necessarily on the spot. I will definitely say that. But if there's evidence of that, I would feel comfortable in my own skin to say, yeah, member, you probably need to step down because you've shown that you have a pre-existing bias. But only if I have enough evidence to do so. Ethically, that is a good dilemma. It's a good question. So 3.2, still on Samira and Mary. While reviewing the details of proposed chicken coop, still, again, backyard of a home, subdivision assuming. While reviewing the details, Samira tells staff that she thought that it was a dumb design for a chicken coop that would be placed in Mary's backyard. She tells staff that she would recuse herself from the case. She says that she would rather use the time away from the meeting to answer emails than deal with addressing the coop's design flaws during the meeting. An alternate member fills Samira's vacant seat, and the board denies the special exception. So what are the ethics, conflict of interest? What else could have been done in this case?
I think it was her option. She opted to step out, remove herself, and the discussion alternate was placed.
Okay. So that's, she actually was taking the right ethical decision by recusing herself. Okay. What about everybody else?
I think you should still be at the meeting to at least view and see what the decisions of the discussion were instead of not being there. And that's my personal opinion. I don't know. I mean, I think even if there's a conflict, it's your due diligence as a commitment you make to be there to at least be an audience member.
Yeah.
If her issue is just because she doesn't like the design, there's nothing architecturally or, against code, then.
Well, could an argument be made that if she had participated, she could have helped make the design better because she could have, and then if it was a better design, could it have been approved? Is that a furtherance of the planning process?
You didn't really have a justifiable reason to recuse yourself. I don't know.
I'm not sure Samara's an architect.
Architect designing a chicken coop, that sounds about right.
Or an engineer.
Let's say they have architectural requirements or something like that in the code. So.
If she was that strong with your thingy, she did the right thing.
Okay, so finishing out Samira and Mary. Samira reviews Mary's proposal for the chicken coop before the hearing and asks questions of staff. She mentions to staff that she's a member of PETA and that she would never consider building a chicken coop as she felt they were so inhumane. Samira does participate in the hearing, though, asking questions about the code requirements for special exceptions, about the proposal, never mentions her PETA affiliation. She ends up voting in favor of the chicken coop request. What are the ethics behind this one? And is it a conflict of interest?
She has any ethics.
That's weird.
She doesn't have any.
She did what was right for the community, not herself.
she put her job forward.
So it was ethical. She was acting in the community interest as opposed to her own, set aside her own bias. I would say in this case, this is probably a good one to end on because she did act probably ethically, unlike the other ones. So, okay, we'll wrap this up. If anybody's got suggestions for future training topics, the training coming up in September is slated to be kind of just a community roundtable like what we did last fall. So all the jurisdictions will talk about some hot topics and how things are going and so on. So, yes.
A quick question, because I don't know the answer, but I know other bodies, they file a conflict of interest form.
Mm-hmm.
Is that required of BZAs and planning commissions if there's a financial conflict of interest?
So in the cases that we just in the scenarios where it's a case-by-case thing, no, there's no form that's required. You just recuse yourself, state why you are stepping aside. That's very important. But there's no forms, at least none of us have forms. Some places might have a form, but it's paperwork. That's as opposed to the conflict of interest for all public officials, which would be the form that you filled out. If you have that, if any member has that situation where you have a contract with your jurisdiction, yes, you do have to fill out that conflict of interest form. So
that is applicable to BZAs, planning
if
commissions?
yep. So again, if you own that office supply store and you sell paper clips to the city police department, that's a contract. You need to fill out that conflict of interest form. But if you're on the city plan commission as a office supply owner and another office supply store comes into town, that's a different level of conflict of interest under a different statute that you don't have to file with. You do have to address it in the minutes.
Right.
So
the county just had an audit, and one of the big topics from State Board of Accounts was filing your conflict of interest forms on Gateway and having the body that appointed you to whatever board has to also approve that conflict of interest form. So that's something I think what we learned at a county level is a lot of people don't have awareness of that, and they're not compliant with that.
Yeah, and that also was what brought it to my mind to include it for all of you. Because it is, you don't always think of yourself as a public official. Sure, you're a member, but you also have some of the same laws and rules as officials, as elected officials. So.
We had to file, we had to do that with city council.
Yeah. Yep, it's an annual filing. So.
I have a question. You mentioned legal counsel several times tonight as somebody that can offer advice and opinions. Say there's a planning commission that does not have faith in their legal counsel for whatever reason. What's the process of, do they have any authority to find new legal counsel, or is that a commissioner job, or what is the process to change legal counsel?
So, no, that's actually worth really clarifying. So each commission's legal counsel acts in the interest of the commission or board. We'll say that's the hypothesis here. But because conflicts of interest are often self-determined, unless there's really evidence, as was asked of me, if I have evidence that, hey, you definitely have a conflict of interest, I will bring it up to you and say, you really should recuse yourself. But if it's really a question, definitely if it's an ethical question, and you need to somebody to talk to your personal legal counsel, because they know you. But yeah, if you want to talk to the commission/board counsel as well, that is an option. But again, it's a self-determination sort of thing. So.
Well, I'm speaking like broader on what we can do as a planning commission if we want to change legal counsel.
Okay, so you're getting away from.
I'm getting away from the specific, like like be specific and talking more broadly.
Yeah. It depends on where you are. So legal counsels are typically adopted by either by the Planning Commission, which then provides it to the BZA. And again, that's usually those planning commissions that have hiring authority granted to them, which none of ours do. So it goes to the next level up, which would be at the county, the county commissioners, or at the city and town level, the city and town councils. In the case of the county, since you're on the county legal counsel was brought on a few years ago. Commissioners changed the primary legal counsel that is for county commissioners, but only the county commissioners. You left all the other legal counsels in place for county council, planning commission, drainage board, health board. I don't know who else has them. So ultimately, it goes to the governing board, which would be county commissioners or city council. So if
the commission wanted to make a change, they could maybe petition the commissioners during one of their meetings and say, we request a change.
I don't know that it would require a meeting petition, but just a request to the commissioners, and they can opt to determine whether it actually needs to go to a formal meeting or not. So I don't want to kind of step on what's public meeting material versus.
They have to show justification.
I don't believe so, because it's basically an agreement.
Okay.
So it's not an appointment. It's not a contract in most cases. It's hourly agreement. If it was somehow an appointment, then yeah, you probably would have to show cause. But otherwise, the terms of the contractor agreement. So yeah. So yeah, city council actually had this happen too when the old legal counsel for planning commission retired so they took their current legal counsel and asked who can fill this spot, and so that firm wound up selecting somebody as well. So, good question. Any other thoughts before we call it a night? Okay, we'll call it a night. Thanks everybody for coming.
I just got a text. Show up right in with it. Didn't say what. Tomorrow, Thursday, and Friday. We're down. Have you? I'm certified.
Where's my? See ya.
Yeah. No, we're canceling the planning commission. I'll be out of town next week. I don't even remember what's on.
I don't know.
A whole bunch of minutes.
Good stuff, yeah.
Again, broadcast.
No, I figured that.
We have a